welcome to this guide for how to produce these red research cubes continuously without any need to store hydrogen or graphene for that matter. So this is perfectly balanced input and output, and it's also quite scaled. So this is 12 per second on the production line. So yeah, we'll go through how exactly it works and over the course of this video. So the first stage, if we look at what it takes to make these energy matrices, right? It takes 2 hydrogen and 2 energetic graphene, right? So to be able to produce 12 per second, which was our target, we need to produce 24 per second of each of these, right? Because it's a 2-for-1 relationship. Now, the way that hydrogen is produced at this stage of the game is that it is via this recipe here. From crude oil, you get refined oil and you get hydrogen, but you get a lot less hydrogen than you get refined oil. So then what you want to do is actually turn it into, use the X-ray cracking recipe, which produces some energetic graphene and a lot more hydrogen. The problem that you usually run into when you put this together is that you end up with too much hydrogen and you have to store it. So the way around that is that you put down a little bit of coal-based energetic graphene production to supplement the what is already being produced by your production lines, right? Which means that you can sink all of the hydrogen into your red cube production, right? If you get the numbers right, and we'll go through the numbers in a minute. Now, the other thing to actually keep in mind is that you need something to kick off the system, right? So by default, it's sort of going to be producing some graphene. You can see that we have some gaps in here as well, right? So we still have the system sort of gradually lifting up to the full production rate. So to do that, you actually need to take this graphene line over here that's producing at a full rate and just use it to supplement this first set of red energy matrix production, right? Because it means that you're guaranteed to be able to sink all of your hydrogen. But you also want to make sure that the energetic graphene that's coming from the chemical production lines or the refining is prioritized. And the way that you can do that pretty easily is using this method, is where you have a T intersection, and the thing that you want to prioritize is the one that just goes through the top of the T. And essentially we've done that on both sides here. This is the other way that you can do it. You can use sorters. So if there's a full belt, the sorters aren't going to do anything, right? So that's a really important step in this whole bit. And that means that any hydrogen that comes gets absorbed, which means that the energetic graphene production can sort of scale up, and gradually, as you keep being able to sink the hydrogen, you end up being able to produce more and more of this graphene. Okay, so that's this part. The other part that we then want to look at is how does it work sort of from the start. So on this side, we have all of these refineries taking the crude oil and producing the refined oil and the hydrogen on the output. Now, we actually have this proliferator here as well, which we're not producing enough of at the moment, so we would need to fix that. But this proliferator actually sprays the crude oil here. And the reason that we're doing that is so that we don't need quite as many of these refineries. So what we've done is that we're actually using the... look at this. I messed up. We actually want the production speed up here. So that was just a paste error because we were using the blueprints. So I do need to fix that, but I'll fix that later. So there's not that much of a difference, and that probably explains why we're not getting the exact right output rates. But anyway, I'll fix that later. So if we look at the numbers here, right? So these are all the numbers that we need to be thinking about. So the target is 12 energy matrix per second, right? So it takes 2 energetic graphene, 2 hydrogen, so we need 24 per second of each, right? And then the next thing is that we need to look at this recipe to figure out what the balances are. And the way that I did it is going backwards, but we'll work through it going forwards, right? So what I wrote down here is essentially whatever it takes to get to 24 hydrogen, because I know I'm going to be short on energetic graphene, right? So the crude refining stage, right, takes 16 crude oil in and consumes 16 crude oil, produces 16 refined oil and 8 hydrogen, right? So that's the crude oil to refined oil stage. Then if we add on the stage for producing the hydrogen and energetic graphene, that again consumes 16 refined oil, so that's everything that we're producing. It also consumes 24 hydrogen, but then it produces 48 hydrogen and 16 energetic graphene. So if we do the sums here in total, this sort of series of stages produces 24 hydrogen and 16 energetic graphene, which is close to what we actually need overall. We need 24 per second of each. So then you need to supplement this 8 per second energetic graphene with energetic graphene from coal, which is what you saw earlier, right? So this is the end-to-end production line. This is essentially what needs to happen. And then we have to think about, well, how many of these refineries do we need? Well, 16 crude oil produces 8 hydrogen and 16 refined oil in 1 second and 32 refineries. So that's the answer. So you just look at the recipe and then you do the maths and then you end up getting to 32 refineries. But then the problem that you run into is that one Mark I belt can only actually carry at most 6 items. So we have to scale this back into a few lines where we carry at most 6 crude oil or 6 of some item, right? And the way that we do this is that we use the, we just pick the maximum, which is the crude oil, and then we divide it up using that, which actually turns out that you can put 12 refineries on the back of 6 crude oil, right? And that is going to produce 3 hydrogen and 6 refined oil. And the other thing that we're doing here is that we are using the proliferator, the Mark I, so that gives us a 25% production speed boost. So then instead of 12 refineries, we actually only need 10 refineries, which is pretty nice. Okay, but 2 times 12 is only 24, so we're still missing 8 refineries, right? So then we need this last production line that's a little bit lower scale, where we take 4 crude oil in and produce 2 hydrogen and 4 refined fuel out in 8 refineries. And again, with proliferator, we just need 7 refineries. So that's what you can see down here. Okay, so that's already using production speed up. But yeah, you can see that what we've done here is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is not right, so we need 1 more. Crude oil unit that we can put down here. Oops. This is of course using blueprints. And then what you can see is that we have problems here because of the blueprint. That the blueprint has the wrong thing in it, which of course is my fault, but anyway, so we have 8 of these refineries and then 2 lines of 10. You can see that all of them are actually producing, which is always a really good sign. So let's just quickly finish this off. Okay, so then the next stage, I have to kind of finish this quickly because we're at 80% power, which is never a good thing. So this takes a lot of power as well, keep that in mind. But you saw it working completely at the start. Okay, so the next one is that we actually need to turn all of this into output, right? So based on this sort of chain that we had at the top, which you'll be able to find in the description, you know, all of this sort of, these facts that I put down will be there in the description. So you actually need 64 refineries. And they're going to be consuming 32 hydrogen and 16 refined oil to produce 48 hydrogen and 16 energetic graphene. And then again, we have the same problem where, you know, we can't, we can only do 6 per second. So that's why we're, instead of doing lines of 64, we're doing lines of 24. Now that does mean that we need 12 hydrogen. So I'll show you those little bits as well in the production lines. This basically means that we need 2 hydrogen belts, which you'll see at the start. And of course 2 hydrogen, 2 and a bit hydrogen, or 1 and a bit hydrogen output lines here. So we need 2 of these, and then we need 1 slightly scaled down version, which only has 16 refineries. And of course with the proliferator, we only need 20 and 13 refineries respectively. So now we need to look at this. Now the problem that we have here is that this belt is only going to feed about 3 hydrogen per second, right? So we need to find a way to get this to 12 hydrogen per second. So that's where we get these refineries to boost the production, the belt here to 6 per second, right? But these 4 refineries are actually going to produce a little bit more than is needed, which is why we have this splitter in place that prioritizes up and then supplements some of this over here. Now the reason you're seeing that not all of it is going at 100% is because of the power problems that we have. Okay, then the next step is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these, right? These guys need to produce this full belt at the back here, which of course they're not, but you know, that's their purpose. If all the power was here, they would be. Okay, so then that doesn't quite produce enough, but that's fine because we're getting supplemented from here, which you just saw move over there. And then ideally this top line here is a full production lane, like it's going at 6 per second, right? And then once we have the, you know, the input lines taken care of, the rest of it is just going to be producing the output hydrogen from this line, right? So we're going to get 1 full line and a little bit more, and that's what this is all about, right? And this line is exactly the same. And then if we look at the last line over here, we see that this is a slightly scaled down version, right? So essentially this stage is a little bit smaller because we don't need as much hydrogen on the input, and we don't quite get as much hydrogen on the output. But other than that, it works exactly the same. So this is the kind of slightly scaled down version of it. Right. And then if we look at this, which is all still producing, which is great, although at a reduced rate, as you can see. Here we just end up sinking all of the materials into all of this production line, and of course we can have 2 input belts, right? 2 full input belts just go onto 1 full output belt. And it's the same over here. And the important thing to remember is that the reduced energetic graphene rate needs to be merged with the lower production rate of the energetic graphene, right? So over here, we have 1 set of smelters that will produce at the full rate and 1 that will produce at this just small enough rate to supplement this one to a full belt. Now that's not happening because of the power problems that we have, but if they weren't there, this would work. Yeah, then you just feed these 2 hydrogen lines in and then you're good to go. So that's the that's how to produce these red energy cubes, matrices, at full rate without long-term hydrogen storage. So what I'm going to do is fix the power problems, and then we'll show it to you working when all the power is properly working. Now we are back. We have fixed the power problem, at least for now. You never sort of fully fix it in Satisfactory, that's the whole point. But yeah, as these production lines are starting up again, we can watch them sort of unfold from dormancy. So this one is already fully working. And then, you know, these are just used on the input, so they're not going to activate for at least a little while until the input is needed again. But yeah, we will see that this will build up to full production lines here over time. and this is again going to be producing full lines of output. So we'll just give this a moment to spool up, and then we'll show it to you once it's all nice and running. Okay, we've just let it go for a minute, and you can see that it's just coming at the full rate here, and we don't have any hydrogen building up anywhere. It's all going to be consumed and turned into these red energy cubes. Of course, at some point the storage will be full again, but you know, that's just the way it's going to be. And the one at the back here is still sort of spooling up a little bit, but you can see that it's going to actually spool up to be producing at a full rate as well over time. So as this production line down here sort of fully gets going as well, you can see that, you know, at this point here the line is pretty much full, so that just needs to trickle through to the other end, and then it will all be good to go. So yeah, that's how to produce these red energy cubes, energy matrices, without any storage. As you can see, there's no big massive storages that you usually see once you get to this stage of the game. It's all just producing, and at a very high rate of about 12 per second. And we can even maintain over time with just these storage units here. So yeah, pretty proud of all of this. Took a long time to put together, but in the description you'll find all the information that you need to build it yourself. And yeah, for the purpose of the video, thank you for watching, and until next time, bye.